On Wednesday, June 24th, 2026, at 4 minutes past 6 in the evening, the ground under northern Venezuela tore open twice in 39 seconds. A magnitude 7.2, and then before the dust of the first had even begun to fall, a magnitude 7.5. It was the strongest earthquake to strike the country in more than a century. In La Guaira, the same narrow strip of coast where the mudslides of 1999 once buried tens of thousands, more than 250 buildings came down. The international airport cracked open. The capital lost its lights. By the third day, the government counted 589 dead and said plainly that the number would rise. The cameras went to the collapsed towers in Caracas. They went to the baby pulled alive from the rubble, to the hospital wheeling its patients out into the street on their beds. They did not go to a 40-centimeter pocket of air under a fallen slab in Catia la Mar, where a man who had spent 18 years proving that concrete does not lie spent 9 hours waiting to die. His name is Andrés Graterol. He is a structural engineer. He is 43 years old, and until the night that slab came down, he had not believed in God since he was 16, since the year the mountain came down on his father. What he says happened to him in the dark, in the hours when he stopped breathing, he cannot prove with a single one of the instruments he has trusted his whole life. He can only prove one thing, that a thermal scanner read his location as empty, and that a fireman heard 3 knocks come out of the empty place anyway. This is his testimony in his own words, recorded the day after they pulled him out, the last of 9 now, while the aftershocks were still coming.
My name is Andrés Graterol. I am 43 years old. For 18 years, I have been a structural engineer, licensed in Venezuela, which means that for 18 years, my job has been a single sentence: to know, before anyone else in the room, whether a building will stand or fall. I have signed my name to schools, to apartment towers, to a parking structure in Valencia that holds 900 cars on a slab I calculated myself. I am telling you my credentials first, the way I would at the start of any report, because I need you to understand what kind of man was lying under that concrete. Not a religious man, not a hopeful man, a man who reads load tables the way other people read scripture, and who believed, completely, that the physical world is the only world there is. I am recording this on the 26th of June. It is 2 days after. I am in a shelter near Catia la Mar, a school gymnasium with a bed sheet hung on a wire to give the families a little privacy, though privacy is a strange thing to want when you have just watched a city fall down. There is a paper cup of cold coffee next to me that someone handed me an hour ago, and I have not touched. Every few minutes the floor moves, an aftershock, small, the kind I would once have measured and dismissed, and every time it moves, every single person in this room goes quiet and looks at the ceiling. I am recording on my phone, alone, because I have something to say, and I do not know how many more of these aftershocks the roof above me has left in it. I have never spoken into a camera in my life. I am an engineer. I write things down, so forgive me if I do this badly. I was born in Caracas in 1983. My family came from Yaracuy, from the green country in the west, and my father, Tomás Graterol, was a maestro de obra, a master builder. Though he never had a degree, never had a license, never had a single letter after his name. He built houses with his hands and his eyes and the flat of his thumb. I can still see him pressing his thumb against a fresh-laid wall, very lightly, the way you'd touch a sleeping animal, and tilting his head, listening. The wall tells you before it falls, he used to say. You just have to put your hand on it and shut up long enough to hear. My mother, Carmen, was a primary school teacher, patient in a way my father never learned to be. I grew up in the smell of wet cement and chalk dust, between a man who trusted his hands and a woman who trusted her God. And for a long time, I thought I would have to choose one of them. In the end, I chose neither. I chose the numbers. The numbers, I decided, were the only thing in the house that never argued. My mother used to leave the door of her room open a crack when she prayed, on her knees on the tile floor before the sun came up. And as a boy, I would lie in my bed and watch the strip of candlelight under the door and listen to her murmur names, our names, the neighbors' names, the names of the dead. She prayed the way my father touched walls, with her whole attention, certain that something on the other side was listening and load-bearing. I loved her for it the way you love a person for a habit you have decided is harmless. I did not believe it did anything. Even as a child, I had already started keeping a separate ledger in my head, what people hoped for in one column and what actually happened in the other. and the two columns never added up the way the grown-ups promised they would. I should tell you, plainly, because the rest of this will not make sense otherwise. I have not believed in God since I was 16 years old. I was raised to. My mother knelt every morning. My father crossed himself before he climbed any scaffold. Every time, a small superstition for a man who otherwise trusted only gravity. I went to Mass. I took communion. I said the words. And then, in December of 1999, I stopped, all at once, the way a wall stops being a wall, in a single afternoon, with no warning that the ones who lived through it could see. You may not know what happened in Vargas in 1999. The world mostly does not. For days it had rained on the mountain that stands over La Guaira, the Avila, the green wall between Caracas and the sea, rained the way it had not rained in 100 years. And on the 15th and 16th of December, the whole face of that mountain let go at once. Not water, the mountain itself. Mud the color of wet ash, the size of houses, moving faster than a man can run, carrying boulders the size of cars, coming down through the towns on the coast in the dark while people slept. They have never agreed on how many died. Some say 10,000, some say 30,000. Whole neighborhoods were simply gone in the morning, paved flat under 20 feet of mud, and they are still under there now, an entire buried city beneath the one that got rebuilt on top of it. I was 16. We were in Caracas, on the safe side of the mountain. My father was not. He had gone down to the coast that week for a job, and when the mountain came down, he did what he always did. He went toward it. They told us later, the men who survived with him, that he spent the first night pulling people out of the lower floors of a building that was filling with mud, like a glass filling with milk, that he got an old woman out and 2 children and went back in for a third, and that was when the second slide came through and took the building and took him with it. They never found him. He is somewhere in that buried city to this day, under the place they rebuilt, and I have driven over him 100 times without knowing exactly where. There was no funeral because there was no body, and I have come to understand that a funeral is a kind of structure too. It holds the weight of a death so that the family can stand under it without being crushed. Without one, the weight just sits on you, undistributed, forever. For years afterward, the government talked about recovering Vargas, about rebuilding it, and they did rebuild, on top, the way you pour a fresh slab over a cracked one and call it repaired. But the people are still down there. The coast I grew up being afraid of is built over a cemetery no one is allowed to dig. As an adult, I would drive the old coast road with my instruments in the trunk, on my way to certify somebody's new tower, and I would pass over the place the map said my father was, and I would feel nothing, on purpose, with great discipline. I had gotten very good at feeling nothing on purpose. It is, I see now, the main skill I spent 27 years perfecting. I prayed that night. I want you to understand that I did everything my mother taught me. I knelt on the floor of my room in Caracas, and I prayed all night, the real way, the way you only pray a few times in your life, with my whole body, bargaining, promising, begging, telling God exactly where my father was and exactly what he needed to do about it. And in the morning, a man came to the door with my father's watch and his identity card, found in the mud, and nothing else. And I stood up off my knees, and I understood something with the same cold clarity I would later bring to a stress calculation. I had asked, sincerely, with everything I had, and the answer was 30,000 people under a mountain and my father's watch in a stranger's hand. God, I decided, had been given his chance, the largest, clearest chance I would ever be able to offer him, and he had let the mountain come down anyway. After that, I did not hate him. You cannot hate something you have decided is not there. I simply closed the door, the way you close the door on an empty room, and I went and found something that would never lie to me. That something was engineering. I want to be honest about why, because it matters for what comes later. I did not become a structural engineer to build beautiful things. I became one so that no building would ever again come down on someone I loved. That was the whole of it. I went to the Universidad Central. I studied the way a man studies who has a reason, and I came out and I gave the next 18 years of my life to a single proposition, that concrete does not lie. Steel does not lie. A column either carries its load or it does not, and which one it does is not a matter of prayer or luck or what God is feeling that morning. It is a matter of the numbers, and the numbers are knowable, and if you respect them, people live. I learned the covenant codes the way my mother knew her rosary. I knew the seismic provisions cold. Because of all the countries to build in, this is one that shakes. I could recite the seismic zones of this country like a prayer I actually believed in. The design accelerations, the response spectra, the detailing rules that exist precisely because we are sitting on the seam where the Caribbean plate grinds west against South America, the same seam, the same fault system that let go under La Guaira that night. I kept a notebook always, the way my father kept his thumb, site notes, load paths, little sketches in the margins. My office was on the 9th floor of a building I trusted, cold from air conditioning I always kept too high, the the hum of it under the hum of the computers, a cup of coffee going cold at my elbow. I have never once in my life finished a cup of coffee. My sister used to laugh at me for it. And I would sit there and run the analysis until the structure in the model either stood or fell. And when it stood, I felt the closest thing to peace I knew. Control. A world made of knowable things, behaving the way knowable things behave. I certified buildings. I red-tagged buildings, condemned them, made enemies doing it, because I would rather a man hate me than a slab fall on his children. Let me give you one, so you understand the kind of man I was. In 2014, they brought me onto a half-finished tower in the east of Caracas. 22 floors, the developer well-connected, the money already spent. I found that the column splices on the lower floors had been detailed wrong. Not catastrophically, not obviously. The kind of error you would never see from the street. The kind that holds up fine for years and then finds you on the one bad day. I red-tagged it. The developer offered me money. Then he offered me trouble. I had a wife then that did not survive my certainty either, but that is another story. And she begged me to sign and walk away. I did not sign. They had to bring 3 floors back down. The developer told me in a hallway that I had ruined him over a problem that would probably never happen. And I gave him the sentence I had built my life on. Probably is not a number I am willing to put your tenants under. I was proud of that. I am telling you, I was a man who took whole buildings apart to keep strangers alive, and who could not save the one person in the world I most needed to. Concrete does not lie, I used to say, the way other men say amen. It was my whole faith, and it was a faith that had never once failed me. Here is the part I have not been able to say out loud until now. 2 years ago, I inspected a residential building in Catia la Mar, 8 floors, 1980s construction, the kind of building this coast is full of. My sister Yelitza lived on the 4th floor of that building with her daughter. The owners association hired me, quietly, because there were cracks appearing in the stairwell and people were frightened, and I went through it floor by floor with my instruments and my training, and at the end I sat in my sister's kitchen and I told her the cracks were cosmetic. Settlement, I said. Old plaster. The structure is sound. I would put my own family in this building, I told her, and I meant it as the highest thing I could say, because my family was the only thing I had left to risk. It would take more than this coast has to give to bring this building down, I told her. Trust the concrete, trust me. She trusted me. She was my little sister, and I had spent my whole life learning how to keep a roof from falling on the people I love. And she looked at me across her own kitchen table, and she trusted me. I have gone over that inspection 1,000 times in the last 2 days. I do it in my head, the way you pick at a wound. And here's the thing that undoes me. I was not careless. I was not lazy. I did the inspection properly, with the right instruments, by the codes. The cracks I saw were cosmetic, they truly were. The building that came down on the 24th of June did not come down because I missed something. It came down because the ground moved in a way that no 1980s building on this coast was ever built to survive. 2 great shocks in 39 seconds. The second one larger than the first, 10 kilometers straight down. My calculations were correct, and my sister is dead. I have spent my entire life believing that if the numbers are right, people live. The numbers were right. I need you to understand why that is so much worse than if I had simply made a mistake. On Wednesday the 24th of June, I was at that kitchen table again. It was just past 6 in the evening. Yelitza had made arepas, and her daughter, my niece, was doing homework at the end of the table with the television on low in the next room. It was an ordinary evening, the dead middle of an ordinary week, the hour when the whole coast is home and cooking, and the light is going gold over the water. Yelitza was telling me about a man she had started seeing, watching my face for approval the way she had since she was small, and I was giving her a hard time about him the way an older brother does, and my niece was rolling her eyes at the 2 of us. I want to keep them there, in that gold light, in that ordinary argument, for as long as this recording will let me. That is the last whole minute of my old life, and I did not know to hold on to it, because you never do. There is no national earthquake alert in Venezuela. I want you to sit with that. A country built on the edge of a major plate boundary, and there is no system, no siren, no warning, nothing. Some people that evening got a notification on their phones, a thing the Android system does now. A few seconds of warning pushed out from the phones of strangers who felt it first up the coast. My niece's phone buzzed on the table. She looked at it and frowned and said, "Tío, ¿qué es esto? Uncle, what is this?" and turned the screen toward me. I did not have time to read it, because that was when the first one hit. I have spent 18 years studying earthquakes on paper, and nothing on paper prepares you. The first shock, the 7.2, though of course I did not know the number then, no one did, came up through the floor like the building had been struck from underneath by something enormous. A single brutal heave, and then the shaking, and it was wrong. It was all wrong, because I knew this building. I had signed for this building, and the building was doing things my calculations said it could not do. The kitchen window did not rattle. It left its frame. The arepas slid off the comal and onto the floor. Yelitza grabbed her daughter. and the part of my brain that has spent 18 years counting was already counting, already screaming the thing I did not want to know, that the first shock had not stopped, that it was not going to be one shock, that the period between the waves was changing, and then, 39 seconds later, before the first had finished, the second one came. The 7.5, the big one, right underneath us, 10 kilometers down, on a fault I could have named in my sleep. The lights went. The whole coast's lights went at once, I learned later. But in that kitchen, all I knew was that the gold light from the window was suddenly the only light, and that the floor I had certified, the structure I had told my sister to trust, the concrete that does not lie, was coming down. I remember reaching for Yelitza. I remember her daughter screaming. I remember the sound, which is not a sound I can put into words. The sound of a building deciding to stop being a building. A sound that comes up through your feet and your teeth before it ever reaches your ears. And I remember thinking, in the last half second before the slab came down, with perfect, useless engineer's clarity, I was wrong. The concrete lied, and it is going to kill her, and it is my fault. Then the fourth floor became the third, and the third became the second, and the world folded shut on top of me, and everything I had built my life on came down in the dark.
If you've made it this far, do me one small favor before we go on. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and tap the bell so the next testimony reaches you the day it's posted. These are stories the news doesn't have room for. The 11 minutes, the 4 minutes, the 9 hours that never make the broadcast. We find the people who lived them. That's all we ask. And one more thing, because it is the reason this channel exists, testimonies like this one are gathered in a book called Real Encounters. The link and the QR code are on your screen, and we are still collecting them. So if you have ever lived something you cannot explain, a voice, a presence, a moment in the dark that should not have happened, we want to hear it. It is completely free to send us your own story. There is a link on your screen and in the description, and some of them end up in the next book. Now, back to Andrés, back to the dark. Andrés Graterol is still in a shelter tonight, in a tent, in a country that is still shaking.
I do not know how long I was unconscious. That is the first thing the engineer in me hates about what I am going to tell you, that it begins with a measurement I cannot make. There were no clocks in the dark. There was no light to read one by. When I came back to myself, the first thing I understood was that I was alive, and the second thing I understood was that this was probably worse. I was lying on my left side. My right leg from the knee down was under something, not crushed. I could still feel my foot, which I clung to as data, a man drowning, clinging to one true number. The foot still has feeling. The foot is not crushed. Above my face, close enough that I found it with my forehead before I found it with my hand, was a flat plane of concrete, tilted, resting on something I could not see. That tilt saved my life. A slab the size of a kitchen had come down and caught on the stub of a column, my column, a column I might have signed for, and left a wedge of air maybe 40 centimeters high and the length of my body, a coffin with a little extra room. I know now that 9 people came out of that building alive. I did not know it then. Then, I knew only the 40 centimeters, and the dark, which was total. The kind of dark that has weight, that you can feel pressing on your open eyes. I called for my sister. I called for her daughter. I called until my voice tore, into a dark that did not have the decency even to echo, because there was no room left in the building for an echo. Nothing answered. And then the dust, which I had been breathing without understanding, finished its work, and the air in my 40 centimeters began to run out. If you have never suffocated slowly, I cannot fully explain it, and I hope you never can. It is not like holding your breath. It is your body filling up with a wrongness, a pressure behind the eyes, a roaring, your own heartbeat getting louder and stupider, and underneath all of it, a panic so total that it stops being an emotion and becomes a physical event, like vomiting, like seizing. I clawed at the slab over my face. I broke fingernails on concrete I had probably specified myself. And somewhere in there, I cannot tell you when, because of the clocks, because of the dark, the roaring got quieter instead of louder, and the panic let go of me. And I understood with the last clear corner of my mind that this was not relief. This was the end of it. My body was giving up the fight because there was nothing left to fight with. I felt myself stop. I want to be precise, because precision is the only gift I have to give this. There was a moment when I was breathing badly, and then there was a moment when I was not, and I was aware of the difference, and then I was not afraid anymore, which frightened the last thinking part of me more than anything else had, because I knew that not being afraid meant it was over. And in that dark, the absolute dark, the dark I have measured against every other dark in my life, and found that there is no other dark, there was light. I need to be careful here, because I have spent 2 days listening to the way people's faces change when I get to this part, and I do not blame them. So I will tell it the way I would tell it to a review board. The light did not come from above me, from any gap, from any direction that made sense. It did not come from a place. It came from a person, and it did not fall on him the way light falls on a thing. It came out of him, the way heat comes off an engine, and by it I could see my own broken hand in front of my face, and the gray underside of the slab, and, impossibly, in a space that did not have room for him, a man. He was crouched in the wedge of air as though there were all the room in the world. He was barefoot. I remember that before I remember anything else because it made no sense. Bare feet. On the broken concrete and the glass and the rebar, where my own body was being cut by everything it touched. Dark hair, a short beard. His face was not the face from my mother's wall, not the pale northern Christ of the cheap prince. It was a face from this part of the world, from somewhere the sun has always been, a face that could have belonged to any man on this coast. His hands were open at his sides, turned a little toward me, and on the inside of each wrist there was a mark, an old wound healed wrong. And I, who have cataloged every kind of failure a material can suffer, knew exactly what kind of wound makes that kind of mark, and knew that no one survives it. His eyes I will not try to describe. I have tried, for 2 days, and every word I reach for is too small, and I am a man who does not reach for words. I will only say that they were dark, and that there was something in them that I have no name for, and that I looked into them and stopped dying. He said my name first, before anything else. He said Andrés, and he said it in Spanish, in our Spanish, the Spanish of this coast, with the music of Yaracuy in it, the way my father said it, not the flat, formal Spanish of a stranger, but my name the way it sounds in my own family's mouth. And he did not say it gently, exactly, and he did not say it sternly. He said it the way you say a name when you are not guessing, when you have known the person their whole life and longer, when the name is simply true. No one has ever said my name like that. I did not know a name could be said like that. Then he told me where he had been. He said, and I am giving you his words as closely as my torn-up memory can hold them. He said, I was with your father in the mud in 1999. I carried out the third one with him. And I, a man who had not wept in 27 years, who had decided at 16 that there was no one to weep to, I came apart, in the dark, under the slab, because no living person on earth knew there had been a third one. The men who survived had told me my father went back for a third. No one knew if he reached the child. And here, at the bottom of everything, a barefoot man in a space too small to hold him was telling me that the third one had come out, and that he had been there, and that he had been there too, in every building I ever red tagged, every wall I ever put my hand against the way my father taught me, listening, afraid. I have been with you, he said, the whole time you thought you were alone. I argued with him. I want that on the record too, because it is the most honest thing I can tell you about myself. Lying there, dying, with the impossible made flesh an arm's length from my face, the first thing I did was argue. I told him I did not believe in him. I told him I had given him his chance in 1999, and he had not taken it. I told him, though my voice was almost gone by then, a torn whisper into a space too small for it, that if he could carry a child out of the mud, he could have carried my father, and he did not, and so whatever he was, I did not want it. And he did not defend himself. He did not explain the mountain. He did not tell me it was part of a plan, or that my father was in a better place, or any of the things people say that have made me walk out of rooms. He just listened, the way my father listened to a wall, with his whole attention, until I had nothing left to throw. And then, into the silence where my argument had been, he told me to breathe. And then he did the thing that I cannot explain away. The thing that makes my colleagues look at the floor. The thing that I would not believe either if a man told it to me. He gave me an instruction. A practical instruction, the kind I have given 1,000 times on 1,000 sites, specific and verifiable and concerned entirely with the physical world. He said, breathe slowly, there is more air than you think. There is a gap to your right, behind your shoulder, where the wall met the floor. And I had not felt any air, but I turned my head, the few centimeters I could, and there, faint, cool, real, was a thread of moving air I had not found because I had been facing the wrong way, dying in the wrong direction. When you hear the men, he said, knock 3 times, not more, save your strength. 3 times, and they will dig where you are. I want to stop and be an engineer for one moment, because this is the moment the engineer cannot get past. When the rescue teams came through that section of the collapse the next morning, and it was the next morning, I had been under there the better part of 9 hours. They were using thermal imaging cameras, the way they do, scanning the rubble for body heat. I have since spoken to the fireman. His name is on the record. I will not give it here without his leave, but he is real, and he signed a statement. He told me that his scanner read the void I was in as empty, cold, no one there. They were going to move on. They had a whole city of the dying to get to, and a machine telling them this spot was a grave, not a rescue. And he told me that as he turned to go, he heard 3 knocks come out of the place the machine swore was empty. Just 3. He made his team stop. He made them dig where the scanner said there was no one because of 3 knocks, and 40 centimeters down they found a man who had been told, by something the camera could not see, exactly when and exactly how to knock. I do not know how to make that into hypoxia. My colleagues have tried. They are good men and they love me, and they have explained to me, gently, about the oxygen-starved brain and the company it invents, about the dreams of the dying, about how a man who lost his father to a mountain might, under enough pressure, build himself a comforting God out of memory and panic. And I have listened, because for 43 years I was the man making that explanation. But the oxygen-starved brain does not know about the 3rd child in 1999. The dying dream does not tell you to turn your head toward an air gap you cannot feel. And the comforting hallucination does not show up on a fireman's report as 3 knocks out of a void the thermal camera read as empty. I have built my whole life on the principle that the physical world leaves evidence. I cannot now throw that principle away because, this one time, the evidence points somewhere I spent my life refusing to look. When they pulled me out into the gray morning light, I was the last of the 9. I was saying something over and over, they tell me, though I do not remember saying it. I was saying, I want you to be real. That was all. Not a prayer I knew. I did not know any. Just that, again and again, to the man who was no longer crouched beside me, but who I knew, the way you know your own pulse, had not left. I felt it before they even had my leg free. It is the one thing I will not let anyone take from me with a diagnosis, because it happened in my body, and I am an instrument I trust, a heat rising up through my chest, and the weight, the specific weight I had carried since I was 16 years old, the weight of 30,000 people and my father's watch in a stranger's hand, lifting off my shoulders, physically, the way a load comes off a beam when you finally get the jack under it. I did not decide to believe. I am not even sure believe is the word. Something was lifted off me that I had not known a man could carry, and I have not been able to put it back down since, and God knows I have tried, because it would be easier. It was in this shelter, on the first night, that a man, a volunteer, a chaplain, going tent to tent, found me shaking and could not get a word out of me, and instead of talking, he opened a Bible. I had never owned one. I had not opened one since I was a boy. He read me the part where a man named Lazarus has been dead 4 days, sealed in a tomb, and the voice calls into the dark, "Lazarus, come out," and the dead man comes out, still wrapped, into the light. I had to ask him to read it twice, because I had been in the tomb. I had been 4 days dead in my own way for 27 years, sealed up since 1999, and a voice had called my name into the dark, first, before anything else, and I had come out. He told me there was another one, a man named Saul, a hard man, certain of everything, who was struck blind on a road and got his sight back and was never the same man again. I told him I understood that one too. I asked the chaplain why a voice would call a man like me, a man who had spent his whole life with the door shut, who had argued even at the bottom of the rubble, out of the dark, while the woman beside me, who had never once doubted, who prayed the way my mother prayed, did not come out at all. He did not pretend to know. He is not a man who pretends. He only said that he had stopped trying to do God's arithmetic a long time ago because he kept getting it wrong, and that the one thing he was certain of was that the voice had called me by name, first, before I had done a single thing to deserve it, and that this was the only part that was mine to answer. I have been turning that over for 2 days, about being called first, before the believing, before the deserving, just the name, in the dark, in my father's accent, Andrés, and a door I had kept shut for 27 years simply standing open, with the light coming through it, whether I had decided to open it or not. I have to tell you the cost, because the people who tell these stories without a cost are lying, and I have done enough lying about that building. Yelitza did not come out. My sister, who trusted me, who I told to trust the concrete, who I told I would put my own family in that building, she did not come out, and I did. Her daughter lived. She was at the end of the table, near the stairwell, near the column that held. My sister was beside me, and she is gone, and I am here, and there is no calculation in the world that makes that balance. I have asked the question every survivor asks, and you already know it. Why me, the one who did not even believe? I do not have the answer. I asked him, in the dark, before they came, why he had come for the one man down there who had spent his whole life with the door shut, and he did not give me a reason. He only said my name again. I am learning to let that be the answer. My niece will not look at me yet. I do not blame her. She knows what I told her mother about that building. She was at the table when I said it. Children remember the things adults say with too much confidence. And so I have to live now in the narrow space between two things that are both true and do not fit. That I did my work honestly, and that my work was not enough. And that the sister who trusted me is gone, while the brother who told her to trust is sitting on a phone camera in a shelter, telling strangers about a barefoot man with scars on his wrists. If you are waiting for me to make that comfortable, I cannot. I have stopped trying. The man in the dark did not not make it comfortable either. He did not take the grief away. He only got underneath it, the way you get a jack under a sagging beam, so that it stopped being the only thing holding me up. So I am recording this on the 26th of June in a gymnasium behind a bedsheet with a cup of coffee I still have not touched, and the floor is still moving under me every few minutes, and I genuinely do not know if this roof has another aftershock left in it. I do not know what happens when I stop recording. I do not know how I face my niece. I do not know how I ever sign my name to another building, or whether I should. But I know what happened under that slab, and I am an engineer, and an engineer who finds data that breaks his theory does not get to pretend he never saw it. He has to report it, so I am reporting it. I want to say 3 things to 3 people before I stop. To whoever is under the rubble right now, tonight, in the dark, still breathing, and there are people, I promise you there are people. Turn your head. There is more air than you think. Knock 3 times when you hear them and save the rest. To everyone who lost someone in 1999, on that coast, under that mountain, and who closed the door on God the way I did, and has kept it shut for 27 years, I am not here to argue with you. I held your position longer than most. I am only telling you that the room you think is empty may not be empty, and that I would not have believed that either 3 days ago. And to anyone who has built their whole life, the way I built mine, on only ever trusting what you can measure, I am not asking you to stop measuring. I measured the whole thing. I am asking you to consider that the instrument might not be the edge of the world. So let me ask you what I have been asking myself in this tent for 2 days. If the floor opened under you tonight, if everything you had measured your life by came down at once, in 39 seconds, in the dark, who would you knock for? 3 knocks. Who would you be knocking for? Tell me. I'll be reading.
The sister he was having dinner with did not come out of that building. The colleagues he has worked beside for 18 years have told him it was hypoxia, that the brain invents company when it is starving for air. He has an answer for them, and you've heard it. The scanner said empty. 3 knocks came out of the empty place, and a fireman dug exactly where a voice told a dying atheist to knock. We've collected 100 testimonies like his, soldiers and mothers, pilots and prisoners, people on every side of every line, all describing the same dark hair, the same scarred wrists, the same name spoken first, in their own language, in a book called Real Encounters. The link and the QR code are on your screen and in the pinned comment. If even one of these accounts has ever made you stop and wonder, it's worth your evening. So let me leave the question with you, the way Andrés left it with me. If the floor opened under you tonight, if everything you measured your life by came down at once, who would you knock for? Tell me in the comments. Subscribe, turn on the bell, and join us as a member if you want to keep these stories coming. The next one is already waiting. Until then.